Everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we are talking to Claudia Gold, who is the author of the book, The Power of Discord, Why the Ups and Downs of Relationships Are the Secret to Building Intimacy, Resilience, and Trust. So thank you for being here, Claudia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I wanted to start off with so you practice behavioral pediatrics for over 20 years, and you specialize in infant parent mental health. You've also have written a bunch of different books, and my only limited knowledge about this is about bajillion years ago when I had kids, and I was reading about attachment parenting. And now my kids are now 19 and 21, and now I'm actually doing through a whole bunch of meditation practices, and they're tying in your sense of safety in the world to being how you were raised as a child and how you felt attached, meaning if did you feel heard, understood, and valued. That's at least the kind of synopsis of what I understand about attachment and how that actually affects your meditation practice. I mean, oddly, if you don't feel safe and secure, it's really hard for you to be still and calm.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to, because as you say, it nourishes a solid sense of yourself in the world. So you've been studying this for way longer and in more dimensions. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, attachment parenting was all in vogue. I know that there are many different dimensions to nourishing your sense of self in the world. What your sense is that and how it relates to attachment, or how does that all fit together?
Well, I think attachment parenting means different things to different people. And the work that I do in pediatrics and with Dr. Tronick and in the field of infant mental health is in large part rooted in attachment theory, which is somewhat different
Hmm.
from attachment parenting, but yet it does. I think one core concept out of that whole lovely introduction you just gave is that when we feel fully present as parents with our children and kind of inhabit our own natural authority, that's when things go well with our kids. And that when a whole variety of things can derail that sort of sense that comes just naturally with being a parent. Like, it's not something you read in a book. If all goes well, when you become a parent, that's just there. But if you have, let's say, a very fraught relationship with your own mother, so that a lot of very difficult feelings come up for you, if you have conflict or worse, domestic violence with your partner, then that kind of presence is difficult. Or if you have, I mean, these are just a few examples. If you have a very fussy, disorganized baby, a baby who's slightly premature, or it was exposed to certain kinds of drugs in utero. So all sorts of things can derail that process of fully coming into your authority as a parent. And all of the things I write about, and including in this most recent book, are about how it's in kind of the messy process of parenting. And another phrase that we use is the good enough parent, where you inevitably do things wrong, that you get to that place where you feel centered in your authority as a parent. And that's when it doesn't mean that you are strict. It doesn't mean that you are lax. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means it's more on a spectrum. All of those things happen. Sometimes you're strict, sometimes you're lax, but you generally just feel like you can be fully present in your role as the parent.
Mm. Okay, so if I track this back to my own history, all those things like had problems with your parents were, yes, yes, a lot of them. Um, Luckily, no domestic abuse, nothing like that, but no like huge traumas. Just had a verbally abusive mom, so I can kind of relate to those things. And And it was interesting when I was a parent, I had to face all these different things, like my own mom kind of butting in and telling me what I should be doing, reading books on feeling like I know whatever you did was not helpful for me, so I'm going to read books to figure out what the thing is that I could be doing instead. And I think that comfort of like feeling comfortable as a parent probably didn't come until they were probably like 5. Like, so it took me 5 years to get that place of presence and calm.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, there were like 4 years of like who knows what I was doing to my poor children. So, what is the impact on your kids when, so I was raised in a particular way, my kids were raised in a particular way, they will raise their family in a particular way based on the certain research I have. How does that all affect our sense of safety? So it's about when I was reading something about an article that on you guys, and you said nourishing a solid sense of yourself in the world. So we're imperfect beings. I was an imperfect parent probably for the vast majority of time, but I got a little bit more perfect or good enough, let's say, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I remember a friend of mine telling me about that in second grade, and I thought, yeah, I only have to be good enough. I don't have to be like the perfect, Martha Stewart, you know, entertainer and like, teaching my children 3 languages at the same time, all these different things. So, how do we teach her, like, if we messed up, we didn't do these things, how much leeway should we give ourselves, and what are the most critical components for creating a sense of safety for our children?
Well, I think the whole idea of our book is that we are all going to mess up, and we mess up to varying degrees, and but the way that sense of self develops is in many, many, many interactions, in many relationships over time. So I think if things did not, if there wasn't, let's say, optimal opportunity to feel yourself fully present when your kids were younger, where our brains are constantly changing and our bodies are constantly changing, and we're constantly in new relationships, so that doesn't mean that that's baked in the cake. And
Mm,
that's the point we make in The Power of Discord repeatedly. It's just that the lesson we learn is that if our sense of ourselves in the world, and that core sense of self that you mentioned, kind of emerges in these moment to moment interactions. So if things in our early years are not smooth, so we end up having a sense of self that's not particularly hopeful or tends to be a little bit more anxious, um, then if we want to be in the world in a different way, and I think you've sort of answered your own question, it requires a lot of time and a lot of different kinds of relationships. So I find it interesting that you found your way to meditation, that meditation can be one of many different ways that are different from perhaps the way we were early in our life or with our own kids. And I find it interesting. I have to say, my kids are 22 and 26. To me, it feels like it's still an evolving process as they enter young adulthood, and especially entering young adulthood in the middle of a pandemic, which has its own complications on their emerging identity. I feel like these questions are very present all the time. And even, I have very elderly parents, so I am caring for them much more intimately than I might have been if we weren't in a pandemic. So even there's sort of opportunity for ongoing mismatch and repair and change and growth.
yeah, I like it. So the main message is just be present and relate moment to moment. It's not just like, okay, oh, I messed up the first 5 years, just throw in the towel and forget about it. It's like it's
Oh,
constantly evolving and developing and you said that there are complications of the emerging identity as COVID has um, come about. What did you mean by that?
Well, there's kind of a typical developmental trajectory of, well, I mean, my youngest had just graduated from college. It sounds like yours, maybe one graduated from high school or just entered college. And they're really consolidating in that time their separation and new emerging young adult identity. And I don't know what your situation is, but my uh, child who was in school in the Midwest and on a trajectory to go off on his own had to come and live at home for 6 months.
Hmm.
And that was just totally counter to what his body and brain wanted to be doing. And it was very, very difficult. And I don't know the circumstances of your kids, but I think just universally at whatever, there was kind of a developmental arrest when things changed so dramatically. And I think that this is another lesson from the power of discord, is that inevitable messiness, we can look at it as an opportunity for growth and perhaps finding new opportunities rather than kind of panicking and resisting it.
Mm.
Like, wow, this is not a good situation, but maybe we'll go through something difficult together. Again, I'll just use the personal example where my son is in arts, so he couldn't do anything related to what he intended to do. And he worked as a packing grocery shelves at night. And
Oh,
he ended up having an opportunity to move to New York City, and he volunteers in a food bank, and who knows where it's going to go. But you have to kind of, I think what we've learned together after going through yet another really kind of difficult period of time is new opportunities for growth. So I think that really happens throughout the lifespan, those kinds of things where there's loss and disruption. And if we recognize the value of discord and don't fight it, then we can have opportunities for taking our lives into what Ed calls increased complexity and coherence.
that's a nice way of describing it. Increased complexity and coherence. I love it. Okay. Um, yeah, it's been interesting because as you're sharing your example, so my son is a freshman who was starting to, get a social stride only to have that, truncated, midway through his freshman year. And it's never really got the like I'm a new guy kind of, and now he's like kicked into the sophomore year, and my eldest is in his senior year now, trying to find a job, and so um, really mixed because I feel the strong sense of desire to individuate and go on their own, and that's like what should be happening for their, proper egoic development and maturity. Like that's the standard book of like this is what should be happening,
Mhm.
but it's not. And initially I started worrying about like, well, what's going to happen to my kid as a result of this not happening? Um, uh, and I'm still not sure, but I think that what's been interesting is we've been able to observe like as he's like maturing into an adult, like observing some of the new ways in which he's maturing and just reveling at both of them and how they've changed so much and how we've actually had to change ourselves as parents because they weren't the same kids when they left. And so normally what happens is they leave during that 4 year period. You see them for short breaks, and then you kind of still treat them like a little baby because that's the last time you spent substantial amount of time with them, and you don't see the evolution that happens over those 4 years. But just a little flashpoint looking into it, I actually have this deep sense that our relationship will be stronger because I saw them as they hit this turning point versus they turn and I didn't see it at all.
Yeah, I think you may be right about that. That this is a classic example of this going through something together that increases intimacy and strengthens relationships because there was this very real threat of this virus and really threat to people's lives that we all went through together, and had to, it was very messy, and I'm sure people got frustrated and things were difficult. But if we, or when we emerge on the other side of that, it will be a new kind of relationship that we'll have with our kids.
Mhm.
And I was actually at a very interesting lecture just this past weekend about, there were, previous cultures. I mean, there are cultures who have expectations, even in our own country. This sort of touches on issues of racism and things like that, where there's an expectation that bad things could happen, but many of us in this country sort of have a core expectation that bad things aren't going to happen to us.
Mm,
And then this bad thing happened really to all of us together. And so, its effects will be processed over decades, but certainly it's very significant.
mm. All right, so we've been talking to Claudia Gold, who is the co-author of The Power of Discord: Why the Ups and Downs of Relationships Are the Secret to Building Intimacy, Resilience, and Trust. And I want to talk to you more in the second segment about resilience, which we've been starting to talk about now, but what you've actually found with respect to the research about resilience and how you can um, repair with your children, build resilience in your children and yourself. So, thank you so much.